Hey friends, so glad you hopped on the Collide podcast today. We're taking on some big ideas. I sat down with a therapist, Rachael Gilbert, and we talk about how to identify the things that hold us back. How do we get unstuck in ways that we feel stuck? How do we return back to the origin of trauma or wounds and experience healing? And all sorts of other things. So it's not something to be overwhelmed about. It's not a big pill to swallow. It actually, this interview had so much just grace and patience and gems of wisdom and healing ideas. I enjoyed every second of it, and I hope you do too. Take a listen. Rachael, I love that we get to have you on the podcast. There's so many things to say about you. You're a licensed therapist, a speaker, a podcast host. You wrote the book Image Restored. You're passionate about helping women heal from emotional wounds and confronting the lies that are holding them back so they can step confidently into their God-given identity. There's so many things you're up to. Was there a day where you would have seen this picture of yourself and been surprised by all that God has done in your life?
Willow, I think I might laugh out loud to that question only because I'm not kidding. When we were praying a second ago, I literally just felt the Lord just kind of remind me, just almost like an overview of some of the things I'm doing. And exactly, I had that thought. I was like, yeah, if you had told me I would be doing all these things, I would have been like, no way. And honestly, people who knew me when I was younger, I do get them going, what? You're doing what? And I'm like, I know, it's crazy. And you know why I love that though, is because the Lord totally gets the glory for my testimony, for the work I do now. It wasn't something I set out to do all these things. I just walking with Jesus. It just happened. And so it's just super fun. I'm honored that I get to do some of the work that I get to do in partnership with the Lord, for sure.
I totally resonate with that. I would have never in a million years said I wanted to do what I do now, nor would I think that I could do what I do now. Although I think that every day I wake up and I'm like, are you sure you got the right girl, Lord?
Yep, for sure.
Oh man, but he's good. And he has bigger dreams for us than we have for ourselves. So that's cool. You mentioned your younger self. Can you invite us back to who Rachael was when she was young and why it's surprising that you'd be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I am the youngest of 5 kids. I grew up in a preacher. My dad was a pastor all my child years growing up. And as the youngest of 5, I was often referred to as little Rachael, not only just by my family, but also just my community. And I was very quiet. People would call me shy. I'm not a big fan of that word anymore because I feel like I was quiet. That's different than shy though, right? Anyhow, I was just didn't speak up much. And so much, in fact, that when I was in kindergarten, they almost held me back because they thought I didn't know my ABCs. And my mom had to go up and go, oh, she knows them. She just won't use her voice to tell you them. And so that was the story of my life. That's a silly example, right? My ABCs, but that act of not using my voice was a pretty big theme in my life as a young, even really into my 20s, I'd say. And so the Lord, he used all kinds of different things to get me to kind of start coming out of my shell. In fact, that was my first ministry, was named Life Outside the Shell, because I felt like the Lord was saying, I'm pulling you out. And my verse there that he gave me was 2 Timothy 1:7, for God hasn't given you a spirit of fear or timidity, but power, love, and a sound mind. And so as I started stepping out and using my voice, using my voice doesn't just look like what I'm doing now as a podcaster or a counselor. That really also looks like using my voice for me, right? And getting my own healing and being honest about some of the hurts that I had gone through and some of the trauma I needed to work through. And so it's been such a journey. And that's why I said it's kind of crazy that I'm doing what I do now, even being a therapist and being a speaker and a podcaster, all these things that require me to use my voice, right? And so it's just such a 180 from where I was growing up, but it's also cool because then it's just the Lord totally has his handprint all over my life, and it's fun to look back and see that.
I love that your passion is to help women overcome what holds them back, because I can even hear just from that slight little share that you had to begin to step out of things that you either were identified as or that you identified yourself as, and those things were holding you back. So you're kind of practicing what you preach here. But how does a woman begin to identify what's holding her back? Do you have a process for her? Do you have some good questions that we can ask ourselves? I mean, how do we know, like, hey, these might be some things that are really getting in the way of the life that we want?
Yeah, I think that for so many of us, it takes, this might sound like a strong phrase, but almost, I know at least I experienced this, almost a righteous anger that rose up in me of tired of feeling stuck in some certain areas, right? And almost like I was just on the sidelines of life, watching it go by and feeling kind of powerless, right, to jump in and live my own life. And so when you ask the question, how can a woman know where she's stuck? Because honestly, I think most of us have some areas of stuck all along the way. Like even right now as we're talking, I'm like, the Lord's working out some new layers of healing. We like to call healing like you're peeling off another layer of the onion. Okay, there goes another layer, right? We're constantly pulling off some layers of healing. And I think the Lord does that because he's gracious and kind and is gentle, right? And it just does it in the layers that we're ready for in that season. And so when a woman thinks about where might I be stuck, most of us, really can look at areas of our lives. And this is probably why I love counseling so much, is you get an outside person who can kind of help you go, hey, and notice we're kind of circling the same mountain, right? Like we're still talking about some of the same things. And so even if you don't have a counselor, do you have a journal and you look at, wow, for the last year, I'm still journaling about these certain things, or, and I'm not talking about prayer requests. I'm talking about something that is, something that's holding us back, right? And so if you just look at your life, most people can identify, man, there's this one area that I feel like I just can't move forward in. And why I have so much compassion for that. I'm also, I'm a therapist, but I'm also a trauma-informed therapist. And when you just look at when all the cognitive, restructuring and things like that aren't working, a lot of times it's because we're stuck in some form, some kind of trauma that we need to go in and just kind of hit the reset button on. And that's one of my favorite things to do, and look at it. And I feel like when I teach and we talk about this with women, it makes shame fall off, because a lot of times with women, we tend to carry shame that we can't just get unstuck, right? Like it's like, oh, it feels like everybody else can get unstuck just at the snap of their fingers. They just decide they want to get unstuck and they do. And I haven't seen that to be the case. Again, like I said, with most people, that a lot of times that requires some deeper work. And the beauty of that, that's not for our punishment. It's actually because the Lord's saying, I have so much more for you. Like I want you to live this free life, not just for yourself, but then also for those around you.
Can you give some examples for people who maybe aren't familiar with trauma and trauma work? Can you sort of define trauma? Because I remember even in my own story, I'm laughing, even though it's not funny, but funny now. I would have never resonated and said, I experienced trauma. And then as I began to say yes to God's healing in my life and start going to therapy, and my therapist would ask me questions and I began to talk about an onion, just sort of share things that I went through as a child. She just was like, this is trauma. This is trauma. And I was like, I just always thought of trauma as like some horrific car accident or something. Like, what's the definition of trauma to help someone understand maybe you've been through some trauma and then maybe that's where you got stuck?
Yes. Ooh, I love this question so much, because you're right. That word trauma, I feel like, especially in today's age, it does get thrown around a lot. And people are kind of like, okay, what does that mean? What am I supposed to do with this? And really trauma, and this is why we have to be careful not to compare traumas to other people, right? Because trauma really is just anything that happens in your life that leaves has a negative psychological response. And so you and I could go through the same thing and it could feel traumatic to me and not to you, right? And so that's why the comparison thing gets real hard, because people are like, well, at least I didn't, like you said, have the giant, the car accident that debilitated me. And so, so then we kind of minimize our own trauma, thinking, well, it's not as bad as yours. So when, I don't have any right to feel this. Well, the bottom line, it still hurts you. Your little heart is still hurting. And so the best way, and the thing that it's great for us to be aware of, is there's something called big T traumas and little T traumas. So what you just talked about was a big T trauma, right? The car accident or some major life altering, a divorce or a death, or those things that everybody on the outside looking in could go, oh, that must have been so hard. Most of the time, we're pretty aware of those things. And that's why you'll have people who come into counseling and go, I don't have any trauma. And the ones, though, that I actually think are more sneaky and can do just as much damage as big T are those small T traumas, because small T traumas is, something like, so for example, I know most of us, even the listeners here today, could think back to, for me, I have a third grade memory of when, and don't worry, I've worked through this, but I'll share it with you. You can think of the third grade when that kid called you a name, and, I can still remember, man, what I was wearing and how I was so embarrassed and all of that. So that would be considered a small T trauma, because did I go home and tell my parents, oh, that he called me a mean name and that really hurt my feelings? No, but what it did, though, small T traumas are like, have you ever seen like Jenga, the game where you stack up blocks? So every time you get a little, someone called you a name, or they didn't invite you to the party, or, all kinds of little things, they start stacking up, just like you're stacking up Jenga blocks. And so then what you see is years down the road, somebody will be sitting in my counseling office going, I don't have any trauma. And really, they have a whole Jenga blocks of trauma that has the same core theme of, I'm not loved, I'm not valuable. There's all kinds of negative cognitions that attach to the traumas. And so then that's where we like to go in and go, okay, what's the core message? What is the negative cognition that is not in alignment with who you are, with your identity in Christ, and just is not the truth? And the cool thing, though, about trauma work is we can, just like Jenga, we can go to the very bottom and like pull out the core where it originated from. And a lot of those other ones just kind of fall with it, which is, and I feel like that's God-given, right? Because our brain, God is just so within our being. It's amazing how even science just backs up just how cool that God wired us. But, our reaction to trauma really is protective. It's our sweet brain going, I want to protect you. I want you to remember this so you don't get hurt like this again. And when we're going through trauma, that's actually quite helpful, right? But then the problem is we come out on the other side of trauma and we don't process it. And now that thing that happened 20, 30 years ago is still holding us back even today.
Absolutely. I've done some of that work myself, and I've written about it and stuff, but there's and you would know better because you have letters after your name, but the fight, flight, freeze idea, where there's these protective sort of survival skills that God has given us, but some of us had to do those things to survive or to protect ourselves at one point. But we're still doing them and they're not serving us well. And I feel like that's where a lot of us get stuck. Like, I know for me as a kid, there were so many things I had to do to survive. And so when I find myself still in kind of overprotection mode, it actually hurts relationships more than helps relationships. But it's hard to see. How does a woman get a mirror held up to see sort of the blind spots of, oh, this isn't serving you anymore. Like, you had to do this at one point, but you don't need to still be doing this. What's helpful for that?
Well, this is where community is great, right? Because when we're isolated, just like you said, most of us have blind spots that when it's just us, it's going to be tricky to really notice, okay, this is what's happening. And so, the stronger the community you have, there's a reason that iron sharpens iron, because we can call each other out in a loving way and be like, hey, I notice you're pulling away. Are you okay? And checking in and giving each other permission to speak into our lives. Now, it's not safe when we're just we do need to consider who are our safe people, and who can we be vulnerable with, and who can we give permission to speak into our lives, and then us also be able to speak into their lives. So that's really, really powerful. And then also, even if you're listening and you're going, well, I don't have that strong community, I'd like it. I mean, again, it goes back to looking at what's a recurring area of your life that you're just noticing. Man, I mean, even just like you mentioned, Willow, relationships suffer, right? Like if we notice, man, I tend to kind of end all my friendships this way. What's up with that? Well, that might be an area that we need to go, okay, maybe there's something I'm doing that, exactly like you said, I'm pushing people away when I need them the most. And it might be time for me to do some deep work around this. And that's the first thing I would say, is just kind of paying attention to recurring themes in your own life. And then also asking those who, love you, and everything will just speak in and go, yeah, I see you. I see you doing that.
When we notice reoccurring themes, I love the phrase you use, circling around the same mountain, just because it makes it so silly. You're like, yeah, why am I still doing this? And when we notice patterns and themes, and it seems like God keeps having an intervention on our life about these things, that where areas we're stuck in, but we don't do anything about it. What is that? What's going on there that we're not blind to it? We know it's a pattern, but we're not doing anything about it.
Well, there could be a lot of things, but one of the first things that comes to my mind is that we're comfortable with it. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about a second ago, just when we have those ingrained, yes, we have those survival modes, like you said, the unhealthy survival modes, but we also have unhealthy ways that we communicate and unhealthy ways we deal with emotions. That all these things are things that we should learn growing up, but a lot of times we just don't. It's kind of like you didn't learn the English language, and now as an adult, you're trying to, and you're like, wait, this is clunky. This is weird. And so it's really uncomfortable. If you think about it, like, I know this sounds strange, but back to the circling the mountain, it's kind of comfortable. We know all the pit stops. We see all the same faces along the way. That's going to be really uncomfortable to go, hey, maybe we should go up the mountain this time. Oh, that's going to be some work. That's going to be uncomfortable. What if I get lost? And so even though we want freedom, there is the price of admission to taking new territory is discomfort. And we don't like to be uncomfortable. And so that's, I think, one of the big things that we have to kind of get to the point where we're like, okay, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because I'm sick of circling the same mountain.
It reminds me of the guy who's demon possessed in Mark 5 or something, and not to jump demons into our podcast, but the guy is demon possessed, and Jesus goes out of his way to run into this guy and collide with his life. And he begs Jesus not to take the demons out of him because he's more comfortable with the oppression than he is with the idea that he doesn't know who he'd be without it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fascinating. It's fascinating that as humans, sometimes we're more comfortable with the thing that we hate and that sucks and that's hard than with the idea of being free.
Whether the dream is to build stronger community, write a book, start a nonprofit, tell your story, adopt a child, or take a step toward healing past wounds, Collide's newest Bible study, Go Ahead, will encourage you not to let risk aversion or fear get in the way of an invitation from God. What does an extraordinary life look like for you? What if your biggest dreams can come true? This book is a beautifully designed, colorful 10-part book that centers around Matthew 14:22 through 36, where Jesus miraculously walked on water toward his disciples in a boat. The events and conversation that follow will challenge and inspire you. So dive in now to be encouraged to say yes to the invitation that awaits. Go Ahead is available now on our website at wecollide.net.
It reminds me of the guy who's demon possessed in like Mark 5 or something, and not to jump demons into our podcast, but the guy is demon possessed, and Jesus goes out of his way to run into this guy and collide with his life. And he begs Jesus not to take the demons out of him because he's more comfortable with the oppression than he is with the idea that he doesn't know who he'd be without it.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating. It's fascinating that as humans, sometimes we're more comfortable with the thing that we hate and that sucks and that's hard than with the idea of being free.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you also think about if that means, because sometimes it can come at another cost, like friendships, right? Like if I start getting free, are the people in my life going to be okay with that? I know that sounds crazy, but sometimes it's like, wait, I'm not free in that. You're getting free in that. And, you know, that can cause tension in relationships when we do that, and all kinds of different relationships. And so, yeah, it's not easy. Like this deep work we're talking about, just to be clear, it's not easy. The fruit on the other side is totally worth it. And I think that's what you and I are saying here today, and hopefully giving people hope of, man, doing that heart work, it's so worth it. But it is also, it's hard. It really is.
Very hard. You have a big emphasis on therapy and faith together, not just therapy, not just faith. Can you explain why, as a Christ follower, that's a value of yours?
Yeah. You know, again, as I mentioned a little bit ago, I grew up in church, and I obviously have a super strong faith, and that's my foundation for everything. And to be real honest, I actually didn't really set out to become a therapist. This is another thing, just that along the way, the Lord opened some doors, and I just felt really strongly. In fact, I went back to school, to grad school, after all three of our kids were in school themselves. And so I did it kind of flipped of what most people would do. And so as I really got into the therapy world, I just started to see a missing link. I saw either people had that strong faith, which, don't get me wrong, faith is still the most important thing, right? Like therapy isn't going to save anybody, and all the therapy tools isn't going to set anybody free if we don't first have Jesus. So that's still my foundation, is the Word of God, our faith in Jesus, and all of that. But then I do believe when we look at therapy, all the tools we use are biblical, really. I mean, the grounding things we do, the trauma work we do, it's all just stuff that is all God-given ways to sit down and walk through with people some of their hurts that they're still carrying, so that they can just walk that bold, that confident life and not be held back by some of those things. And so that's why I just love, because I've noticed people kind of can tend to camp out in one of the camps. They're like, I just need faith and we're good. And then we just need therapy and we're good. And I'm like, no, because it's so beautiful when I get to bring the two together, and, you know, let those collide in my office. It's so powerful. And so I'm just very passionate about sharing that with other people.
It's amazing to me, and I think Collide has been used in our area to really try to break the stigma of brokenness and the need for help within, you know, the capital C church around here, but which I love because it's right up my alley of passion. But it's amazing to me how I continue to sit across from women who think that they're supposed to just pray, receive Jesus and pray, and all their issues will fly away. And yet we've experienced so much pain and trauma. I mean, I sat across from a 20-year-old girl a couple weeks ago, and she's been having blackout anxiety, where literally she finds herself at the ER. Somehow she passed out in the grocery store, and the ambulance is called and takes her, and she finds herself there, and she has, you know, no familial help or community. She's new to town, and she's had trauma from abuse as a child, and she's never processed this. So, right, it's coming out sideways in these like anxiety blackouts. And when I invited her into the idea that God thinks she's worthy of healing, And that actually, like, she needs a doctor and a therapist, and she needs the church community and a mentor. And I'm like trying to get a team of people together to help this girl experience healing. And she just at the end of our meeting was just in tears and crying and said she's never heard in all her life the idea that there are other ways that things that God can use to help heal her. She thought she just had to pray and that it would go away.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so sad. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think that's what we believe? Like, why do you, or why should we give ourselves permission to go, God can use therapy, God can use a doctor, God can use, why do you think that's okay for us to see those things as tools God can use?
I think that God, it kind of goes back to us being the body of Christ and how each working member has a different part that they play, right? And so I do believe that God gifts people like myself and, like you mentioned, doctors and different people to be able to usher in healing by the gifts he's put within us. And so I think that when we can partner with and not just be in a box going, okay, if it's not this way, it's nothing. Because here's the other flip side. I have seen people pray and get healing on something, right? And so I never want to put somebody in a box and go, well, if it's not therapy, it must not be healing. Right. That's not true either. God is just so big and so loving and so kind that I just know that he brings healing in different ways to different people. And especially when it comes to therapy, it really is just so life-giving, and why I consider it holy work when somebody sits across from me and they tell me things that they've never shared with anybody before. And it reminds me of something I like to tell people is that if you can't talk about it, it owns you. And so often we have these things in our life that we don't feel safe to talk to just anybody about. And honestly, some of these things may not be, there might be some things in our life that we're going, I don't know that I can share this with my sister or, my best friend or whatever. Now, of course, we want to get to where you have that community that you can. But when somebody is first sharing something that maybe happened to them, that's scary. And like you said, their body is responding. Again, for anybody, when you think about any form of trauma you've been through, big or small, your body responds. In fact, that's when we're doing trauma therapy. We're always asking, where are you feeling that in your body? Because your body's always talking to you. And if we pay attention, we can notice, okay, yeah, I'm feeling it in my stomach. Ooh, my shoulders are feeling really tight. I'm feeling nauseous. That's your body going, something's off here. And so that's where I just love that partnership for us to be able to go, hey, we're just looking at this God-given wiring and starting to talk to your, this might sound strange, but how earlier you said that we have these different survival modes that we go into, like somebody who freezes. There's some physiological things that are actually happening in your body. And so when we can learn grounding techniques so that we can actually ground our body and basically let our body know, hey, you're safe. You are safe. You're no longer a threat. This thing that's coming up for you, you are okay. And so it's that, and I know I'm kind of going off topic here now, but you asked why don't I think we partner with it. But again, I guess I'm just showing there's so many tools. I like to call it a therapy toolbox. Like, let me give you these tools that you can use and partner with the Lord on that. And that, again, I go back to that partnership with Jesus. He can walk alongside us and go, oh, hey, remember that grounding thing, that deep breathing? That's from God, but that's a grounding tool, right? That most people don't even do. It's so simple, but it's like, oh, some deep breathing can help calm my nervous system. Wow, that's really cool. And sometimes we just need someone to remind us too of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, like we have a powerful God who could part the Red Sea and he can speak through a donkey and he can, turn water into wine. But over and over again, when I look at him in the New Testament and he runs into people who are wounded, he so often asks them to participate in their own healing, like to participate in the healing that they long for. He asks the guy with the shriveled hand, stretch out your hand. Like he asked the woman who's bent over, she was bent over by a spirit for 18 years, and he asks her to come forward in, in the service and to heal her. So he asks us to participate in the things that we long for. And a lot of us want to sit around and just hope the pain goes away and the miracle comes. But oftentimes he's like, I actually want to do this with you. One of my questions for you is, how important is it? Because I see a lot of women who are just like, they were invited to just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, like, don't cry, keep it quiet, whatever it is, move on. You just move on, and you just keep moving on, and you move on and move on. Next thing you know, you find yourself, you're like 38 years old and you tried to move on, and then it all starts spilling out sideways. How important is it to go back to the origin of the pain?
Yeah. Well, it definitely, if we were seeing it spill out sideways, we need to. And, the encouragement, though, I would say, if to the listener who's going, yeah, that's me, is start where you're at. I think sometimes when you've been used to being a stuffer, I identify as a stuffer. I used to be a stuffer, if you will, until I became a therapist myself, which means we just stuff emotions, we numb them, we tell ourselves we shouldn't feel that way, we're weak for feeling that way, and so we don't give a voice to our emotions. Back to that voice. Emotions just want to be heard. That like they've gotten a really bad name. You have to name them to tame them, feel them to heal them. And when we just constantly stuff those things and don't give them a name, then just like you said, emotions will always find a way out. But when we don't let them out in a kind, graceful way, usually it's those sideways ways that you just mentioned that we're like, oh my gosh, then it feels overwhelming. And so why I say before I tell people, hey, let's go back and deal with where this all started, that feels really scary and overwhelming to somebody who doesn't have emotion regulation in the here and the now. So I would never, like, even when we do, trauma therapy or even just teaching on this right now, until we have some good resources, meaning, hey, so let's start simple. Start to let yourself feel your emotions in the here and the now. It doesn't even have to be the big giant ones. Just even start naming some that you wouldn't normally. I'm feeling pretty content right now. Or, oh, that really upset me when that person cut me off in traffic. We don't have to linger there all day. Just saying it out loud is starting to name it. And that is emotion regulation. That gets us used to it. And it helps us to go, okay, emotions are not my enemy. They're just telling me, they're the check engine light of our heart, telling me what's happening. That's all they are. They're God-given. We see emotions all throughout the Bible, and they're healthy to feel them, let them up and out. And so, yeah, that's where I would say, if you're like, yeah, I'm noticing it come out sideways, I'm like, all right, let's start simple. Let's just start letting yourself feel a little bit, almost like when you set your meat out to defrost, like we don't nuke it, we don't microwave it. We're like, let's just let it defrost, right? Let's get it ready to cook. And so that's the first step is, okay, some regulation, starting to feel. I love emotion wheels. You can find them for free online everywhere. And start there. Then once we have some grounding there and we're like, okay, I'm good with emotions. Now maybe let's turn back and start to, because it's overwhelming. And that's why I think that's why so many people, back to the mountain illustration, when you like you said, are 40 years old and you've never done this, that's scary, right? Like, oh my, if I open this, what all is going to come out? I don't know. And most people don't really have the time in their day to deal with it. So they're just like, I can't right now. And so I'm like, all right, let's just start in the here and the now then.
Well, and I think that's also why it's so helpful to have someone who will walk and guide you through that experience. If you need to go back because you experienced trauma as a kid or, years ago, and you don't know how to do that, doing it alongside someone who knows how to do that is so huge. And God can use that so much. You wrote a book called Image Restored. Can you tell us your heart behind this and why you think women need to hear your message?
Yes. Yeah. It's a book on body image. And that is another piece of my story. I struggled with weight and body image most of my childhood, adolescent, teen life, and have a whole other full testimony there. I won't go too deep into it. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But that was a big thing for me. That was a silent thing that I suffered through. I suffered through an eating disorder, and nobody knew about any of that, right? It was my way of dealing with some of the trauma I had experienced, and nobody knew, though. It was something I just kept kept private, didn't talk to anybody about until actually I got married. That was the first time I'd talked to anybody. And my husband was the one who was like, I don't think that that's help. He started to call again that mirror, that were somebody reflecting what they're really seeing in you. And he was gracious. He wasn't mean about it. But and so that's my heart behind having written the book. And then once I became a therapist, when I was in grad school, my research project was actually on body image because I was working in an eating disorder facility. It was not a faith-based one, but we would do group therapy. And I remember I was always picking the therapist's brain going, what resources do we have? And they were like, honestly, there's not much. Especially there wasn't much from a biblical perspective. And so the book I wrote it's an interactive book, really. There's workbook components, videos, coloring, journaling, all the therapy tools I'd love, to use with you if I was sitting down counseling with you. I put some of my life story, my personal experience, and then also the experience I've had in the therapy office into one interactive workbook.
So beautiful and so needed. I wonder for people listening, if you want to share just a few sort of maybe indicators of, hey, this might be the perfect book for you if you have this or this going on in your life.
I would say if you notice just recurring negative thoughts about your body, or if you feel at war with your body, you feel like, again, that you're stuck, and I'm not even talking necessarily just about weight, but just that chronic negative, feeling defeated in that area. And because I do just believe our body is a gift from the Lord. And I know that for most women, when we hear that phrase, everything can kind of cringe inside, right? Because you're like, it doesn't feel like a gift sometimes. And I just love to help women start to rethink, review. That's why it's called Image Restored, right? God's original design, not only for our body, but how we view it, how he views it, and just to be at peace within your body, right? Like just going, man, I just want to be at peace within my body. And I also know for me, some of my why is I do have 2 daughters and a son, but I just knew, man, as a mom, I want to do my healing work so that I can doesn't make me perfect. Let's be clear, not perfect, but so I can have healthy conversations with my girls and help them walk through, because there is such a battle for body image. It's not just a female thing, it's male too. But there's such a battle for that. And so that would be one thing I would say is just kind of looking at your thought process and going, have I always just kind of felt at war within my body, and with just like some peace there.
There's so many things I could ask you, Rachael. We'll have to have you on again. But as you think about a woman listening who might just feel really broken today, like she does need healing in some way, shape, or form. She needs that restoration you're talking about, but it feels like she's been circling this mountain a long time. Do you have any words of encouragement around why you believe restoration is possible for her?
The phrase that comes up right now is just that Jesus sees you. And he, when I say we're circling the mountain, do you know what the cool thing is about Jesus? He's walking it with us. He's not shaming us and saying, hey, when are you going to get off that mountain? He's saying, all right, I'll keep walking with you. And whenever you're ready, I'll be here to keep walking you into more freedom, right? He doesn't shame us. He doesn't condemn us. He just walks alongside us and he journeys with us. And I do believe that as he prepares our hearts for that next layer of healing, then he'll start to bring people into our lives, or ministries like Collide into our lives, who go, oh, hey, guess what? We specialize in that, right? And so if you're listening today, I would say this is an invitation from the Lord to say, I've got more healing for you, and it's going to be good. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be full of grace and mercy, and he's going to meet you right where you're at without shame. And I'm excited for you. I get excited when I think about it too.
I love that, Rachael. I love that that's your message for us, and also that it's been true of your own life. So thank you for hopping on and being with us today.
You're welcome. This was fun.
How can women follow along with you and what God's up to through you?
Yes. My main website is my name, RachaelGilbert.com. You do spell Rachael, Rachael. Our clinic name is BBC Health. We're actually located in Texas. And then, if anybody likes to hang out on Instagram, I'm at Rachael J. Gilbert there.
I love it. Thank you, Rachael, so much.
Thank you.
Friend, if you hopped on this podcast today and you have a friend who needs to hear this message that invites someone to healing, make sure you share it. But if that's you and you need some healing today, I want to be another voice that echoes what Rachael just said, that God believes you're worthy of healing, that you're worthy of peace, that you're worthy of goodness, that you're worthy of freedom, that you're worthy of health, that you're worthy of love and relationship. And if you experienced something that made you doubt your worth, I just want to remind you that when Jesus sees you, He loves you and wants so much more for you than maybe you can even imagine. And so my hope is you'll say yes to a healing journey with Him and take a next step. And sometimes the next step can look like calling a therapist. Sometimes it can look like calling a doctor. It could look like doing Rachael's book. It could look like checking out more podcasts we have with Christian therapists. There's a million next steps, but just take even one today. You are worthy. Keep colliding. We'll catch you next week.